Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys checking today's video out and making time. I know everybody's sort of crunched on time these days, so thanks for spending a little time with me today. Guys, today we're going to be talking about different type of retrieves that you use on a bait cast reel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over several different lure categories and sort of show you guys the type of retrieves I like to use on those lures based upon some time of the year, water temperature, and that type of stuff. And then probably tomorrow we're going to do spinning rod or spinning reel retrieves. But today we're going to do bait casters. I think it's going to definitely add up to some more fish for you guys. Real quick, guys, before we get started, I just want to remind you a couple things. You may notice at the bottom of my screen there'll be some products on there that says the View Products Shopping tab on there. Those are products that we're listing for YouTube. I usually list 30 products a day, different fishing products you guys might be interested in. And if you order and buy one of those products off of the links we put in there, it's a good way to help the channel. So much appreciated there. Okay guys, let's talk a little bit about the bait cast reel retrieves. Now, retrieves are critical to generating strikes because, most lures, there's very few lures that you just throw out there and reel in and catch fish really good on. Now, there's some because you can throw like a crankbait out there and just reel it in, just with a steady retrieve and catch fish on it. But most every lure out there, if you tweak it and modify your retrieve, you're going to generate a lot more strikes because bass, for the most part, they feed out of reaction a lot of times. I really think, we talked about this before, I think that most bass feed at night, that are eating hungry bass feed at night. And the fish that you catch during the daytime are out of reaction strikes, and those reaction strikes are generated by retrieve. So I'm sort of going to go over a variety of lures. So first of all, let's talk about crankbaits, guys. When you're fishing a crankbait, very seldom do I just want to cast it out there and just reel it in. Most every single time, I don't care what the conditions are, I'm casting my crankbait out there and I'm reeling it and stopping it, reeling it 2 or 3 times and stopping it, reeling it and stopping it. Little bit of hesitation, because that stop and go retrieve a lot of times is what generates a strike. Now, the speed of the retrieve on a crankbait is directly determined by water clarity and water temperature. In general, if you're fishing a crankbait in some colder water conditions, you're using just a slower stop and go retrieve, something like that, just to get it wobbling in that cold water. And as the water warms up, you're speeding that up just a little bit, stopping it, going it. And in the summertime, when the water's really hot, a lot of times, I'll throw it out there and I'll burn it in like this, stop and go, just real fast like that, stop and go retrieve. So in general, let the water temperature dictate the speed of your retrieve on a crankbait. And also has a little bit to do with clarity. A lot of times you can speed up a lure a little bit more in cleaner water, even if it's cold. So ultimately, you just have to experiment a little bit with it. Okay, now let's talk about like a spinnerbait or a chatterbait, that type of deal. Now, spinnerbait or chatterbait, I'll go over the 2 different ones with both in here, but here's how I retrieve a spinnerbait. Depends on how I'm fishing it. Now, if I'm burning a spinnerbait or fishing it fast, I just throw it out there, keep the rod tip high, and I'm reeling it fast, stop and go retrieve like that. Really, really fast, trying to keep it on the surface. And then if I'm casting it next to objects or something like a lay down tree, it's like I'll reel it out there, just immediate retrieve, and then I'll just twitch the rod tip occasionally like that. Especially like if it's getting right next to a piece of wood and it's almost getting ready to hit that wood, I'll either speed it up or just twitch that rod tip a little bit, try to get a reaction strike. And if I'm slow rolling the spinnerbait, say for example, I'm fishing a heavy spinnerbait and I want it close to the bottom, I'm throwing it out there, I'm just reeling it slow, and then I want to make contact with the bottom, and once it makes contact with the bottom, I'll sweep the rod tip up a little bit and start reeling slow and maybe pull a little bit like that, trying to keep close to the bottom. Chatterbait is another one. Chatterbait or swim jig, same deal. It's like, I'll talk about swim jig first. Swim jig, I'm throwing it out there, rod tip high, shaking my rod tip as I'm reeling it in. Most of the time, it's like some type of a medium fast retrieve with the rod tip shaking. Chatterbait, throw it out there, point the rod tip straight at the chatterbait. I'm reeling it a few times, stop and go like that, stop and go. Occasionally, if I'm fishing in grass, I'll throw it out there, let it go to the bottom. I'll pump it off the bottom, let it hit the bottom, pump it off the bottom, take up the slack, pump it off the bottom, take up the slack. And sometimes I'll also drag it. I'll just drag it off to the side, take up the slack, drag it, take up the slack like that with the chatterbait. That's one of the best things there. Now for big glide bait or swim bait, let's talk about a big glide bait. Glide bait out there, you want to throw it out there, and with a glide bait, you know, you can reel it straight in like that and you can get them to go sideways a little bit. But most of the time on a glide bait, guys, when I'm reeling it in like this, I'm twitching the rod tip down, almost like a jerk bait, just like that. And that gets that glide bait to go like that a little bit more. Swim bait, for example, throw it out there. Based upon how deep I want the swim bait to go, dictates my rod level. If I want to keep the swim bait close to the surface, it's up top, and medium retrieve like that, maybe stop and go a little bit. But with the swim bait, since it has built-in action on the tail, I'm not really interested that much in stop and go. Just occasionally I'll stop it. Most of the time it's just a straight retrieve. And as I want the bait to go deeper, my rod tip lowers. And if I want it to go real deep, I got it down like this, keeping it slow to the bottom. That's a good way to do it there. Now, a lot of the stuff when you're fishing moving baits like that, or moving bait categories, again, a lot of it has to do again with the combination of the water clarity and water temperature. Jerk bait on a bait cast rod, you know, you guys that watch it, I don't fish a jerk bait on a bait caster, I use it on a spinning. But if you do fish it out there, it's just like this. You're throwing it out there, crank it down, you know, 5 or 6 times, twitch it a couple times, let it pause, twitch it, let it pause, twitch it, reel it a couple times, let it pause, twitch it like that. Jerk bait retrieve, again, it's a variation about the mood and the personality of the fish, water temperature, water clarity. Now your slow baits like a jig or Carolina rig, football head jig, Texas rig like that, there's a couple different retrieves with that. Usually for a jig or plastic worm, I'm throwing it out there, got the rod tip high, and I'm just shaking the rod tip without really reeling it. It's like I'm pulling it up like that, take up the slack, come down to 9 o'clock, shake it up like that, not reel it, take up the slack, shake it up like that. That's if I'm trying to hop something along the bottom. Now, if I'm fishing something that I want to drag along the bottom, like a football head jig, I'll make my cast out there, let it hit the bottom, rod to the side, pull it to the side, take up the slack a little bit, pull it to the side like that, take up the slack a little bit, just with sort of a slow medium retrieve. But anyway, guys, that's some of the major lure categories with the bait cast one. One of the things you'll find out about retrieves is you have to start somewhere. There's got to be a foundation about how you retrieve a lure. A lot of times, though, it's a matter of just what the fish want that day. Say, for example, if you're fishing out there and the water temperatures in the low 50s or mid 50s, and you think that the fish are not real aggressive because the water's a little cool, a lot of times that can change a little bit. Say, for example, you have water temperature of 53 or 54 degrees, and you have a really unseasonably warm day. Say it's like say the air temperature is 15 degrees above normal, and you've got a strong southerly airflow with some clouds. A lot of times that will make those fish more aggressive despite the water temperature, and you have to speed your retrieve up a little bit. And vice versa, a lot of times you can have a little bit warmer water temperatures and you can have a bad cold front come through with not much wind, and then sometimes you have to slow it down. So start somewhere, experiment. If you're in an area that you think has some fish and you're not getting bit, change up your retrieve a little bit. I've seen it make a huge difference. But probably overall, guys, the 2 lure categories that are most affected by the actual retrieve. Now, I'm not talking about lure manipulation, about putting lure action on the lure. That's a different topic. I'm talking about lure retrieve. The 2 most critical categories are crankbaits and bladed jigs. I have found that you have to be really precise, and if you don't have the right retrieve a lot of times with a bladed jig or crankbait, you can miss the fish completely, and then the next person can have the right retrieve and just catch a big bag. So anyway, hope that helps, guys. We'll talk later. See you.